We have all that.
Yeah, backups for each other.
Perfect.
Hi, Jill. I haven't talked to you. How are you?
Yeah, good, fine, Heather. Wow, it's been a while, eh?
Hello, yeah.
Yeah.
Couple years.
Yeah. No, wonderful. Wonderful that you guys organized this. I feel really happy about it.
Thanks for accepting the invitation. That's wonderful. Very good. I know you are busy, but
Jill, it's wonderful to see you back again.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And this is after our march, Anil Bhai. We marched for 6 months. So at some point you could ask in the questions, and I haven't put it into the lecture, but please feel free to ask the question.
yeah, I'm sure that question will come up. I know one person who has already said that. Yeah. What happened to that march?
I asked that question and already got the reply, but the rest are not.
Yeah,
I have a preview.
to me also, but
Jill, did the march actually happen?
It happened between October 2nd, 2019, Gandhi Jayanti, to the middle of March, 2020. And Jay was there. He was, Janma Jay was also there. He was one of the marchers. He can vouch.
Okay.
That, we covered six countries, and it was just an amazing experience.
Did you take pictures and recordings of that march? Because we don't have any, as far as I know. On our website, we would like to put some.
Jay, do you want to respond?
Well, we have a lot of photos. Like, we would be uploading photos every day on our Facebook page and on our social media. So if you go to facebook.com/JaiJagat2020, you can see pretty much a day-by-day account of the march. I also edited a music video of our march focused on Armenia, but giving a background of the rest of the march. I will be playing that music video today. So you would see something from the marches, the experience of the march.
Is it possible for us to get the recordings? Because we would like to put them on our website, or if there are links available.
I have the link to this Armenia video.
Okay.
YouTube link, and I can send it to you.
Yeah, please. Yeah, we would like to put on the website.
Yeah, I will do that. If they allow us to.
Oh yes. Oh yeah.
Permission. Yeah.
In fact, there's a whole Jai Jagat international website. Anything you want on that website, you just let us know. We'll send it to you. Anything we can. Yeah.
All right, great. We all seem to be set.
Actually, there is a whole channel on YouTube on Jai Jagat 2020. Fantastic.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
We did how many webinars, Jay? Maybe 40 different webinars. 30 maybe.
5 series of webinars. So within each series, we had 7 or 8 different webinars. So we did webinar marathons, actually, a couple of them. Those were 12-hour webinars.
And Anil Bhai, we're extending the Jai Jagat for the full 2030, for the full decade now.
Okay.
An international team has been set up, and there's a Canadian group. So I'll ask, so Reva Joshi is involved in that, but I think others surely should become involved.
Fantastic. I found your channel on YouTube, and it has a lot of videos.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. I have been in contact with Reva Joshi, so I can definitely talk to her about this thing. Yeah. That's
wonderful.
Yeah, that's very good. Yeah.
Jagji, sorry to interrupt. As a second backup, I'm just trying to log in with my laptop, and I'll try to screen share from that. So in case there's a problem with the internet or something, maybe that might work better. So
right. Everything else fails, then I will try mine.
Yeah.
Sure. So once we're done with the tech checks of other people, if you want, we can just take 2 minutes, and I'll play something from the laptop just to
Okay,
see
whenever
if
you
there-
are ready, let us know. There's a now and start.
Yeah, I'm here.
You're welcome.
That's it. So I think you might have a couple people who've joined now to do their mic checks and stuff. After that, I'll just do it.
Yeah, sure.
Does somebody know Trishna's last name?
Praharaj is Rashmi?
Yeah, I'm here. Okay. Praharaj. P-R.
Praharaj.
Can you
Praharaj.
change your name, Trishna, to full name?
Oh, is it showing Krishna only right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Because we would like to give you full testimonial on the website
Yes.
with your full name.
She is, by the way, like those people who are from Ottawa, she is Bratati Kar's daughter.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Britit,
Yeah, she has been singing on our Mahatma Gandhi.
Yes, I've seen her before.
Actually,
Yes.
she was a
Okay.
little, she was a little baby, almost baby when she started singing with coming to
Ah, okay.
That was really beautiful. Now she's a
Namaste,
young lady.
Kamta ji.
Yeah.
नमस्ते, आप म्यूटेड हैं. ठीक है.
Namaste, Brij Bhai Sahab.
Namaste, namaste.
नमस्ते.
Jagji, you're not running this through Facebook, no? You're just doing Zoom only.
Zoom only. No, no, no.
No,
No, not
okay.
Facebook. Zoom.
Okay, some people cross post, but that's fine.
Yeah, I know they have live also, Facebook plus.
Yeah. No, this is fine. This is perfectly fine.
So, actually, while we are waiting, should I just play the music video to check it once?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah, your bandwidth is low. I think.
It's hanging, right? Into this one. Let me just try it from another system. Give me 1 minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's too choppy.
Yeah, because the bandwidth is low on that
Yeah,
side.
yeah, exactly.
Anil, are you there? No.
जय जगत जय जगत जय जगत पुकारे जाओ शांति की हवा चले जय कहे भले भले तीनों के स्नेह का रात रंजगी गले तीनों के स्नेह का रात रंजगी गले जय जगत जय जगत पुकारे जाओ जय जगत पुकारे जाओ
Is this playback better?
Yes, it is, but breaks up from time to time. That would be automatically happens. I don't know. I can try from my end again.
Yeah, I think that might actually be better for quality at least.
Yeah, let me try again. Let me try.
Sure.
Is it any better?
Yeah, but still somehow, the voice goes up. But that is, I think, Zoom's problem. Like if you, the sound always goes up and down, up and down.
Yeah. You have to have a very large bandwidth on your.
Yeah, and I'm concerned that when so many people.
There should be not much traffic on it. All those things. No.
Yeah. Particularly the flute, it just is very, very choppy, like up and down.
Okay.
Like
Then
that.
let Jay do the playing, because there's not much difference. Then it's
Yeah.
better that he plays it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
All right.
In case it completely fails, then I'll
Yeah, I've always noticed that's the problem with the.
Yeah, well, it's always on the Zoom unless you have very high quality
Absolutely.
internet and everything.
Yeah, and long YouTube or recordings, they are like that. They just go.
Yeah.
Very.
Sorry, I can't do better at this moment. Actually, I have a fiber net connection that I got specifically for Zoom meetings and stuff.
Yeah.
Especially for webinars. But just today afternoon, it somehow crashed. And since it's a weekend and it's BSNL, so being a government service, it will not respond before Monday.
That's true. Well, anyway, but do what you can best do.
Yeah.
So Jay, you go ahead and play your videos whenever, one in the middle and one at the end after the Q&A.
I'll do that. No.
Okay.
Hi, Anne.
Hi, Anne.
Hi, good morning.
Morning. Morning.
Great to be here. Lovely to meet you, Jill. Looking forward to this talk very much. I invited my students. It's hard to know how many are going to show up, but I'm hoping at least a few will.
Oh, thank you so much.
Hi, Anne.
Hi, Heather.
How are you?
Yeah, we got to find a time to chat, you and I.
No, I don't even think I answered your email about chatting before this. I'm sorry.
No problem, no problem. I know we're both like, it's just crazy time.
Yeah.
But maybe we can try in the next week or so. It would be,
Sure.
be great. Yeah.
And
yeah.
instead of your name as being Ann K, can it be Ann Vallely? on the screen, because Anil is going to record it.
But I'm not speaking, right? So I don't have to.
No, that's okay. But because if he takes a screenshot.
Oh, of course. Yeah. You know, my mother's name is Kennedy, and so
Okay,
I sometimes use
that's the secret. Yeah.
But I don't know why it's.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, good.
Voila, and Vallely. There we go.
Okay, now I'm going to mute everyone, and as a co-host, try and see whether you can unmute yourself. Let me mute everybody.
I'm okay.
No, now you're muted. Now everybody is muted. Now you try and mute yourself.
It works for
Yeah,
me.
Jill can do it. Yeah.
I'm okay. I
Yeah.
can do.
I can also
good,
mute
good,
myself.
Good.
Yeah. Okay. Good, Krishna.
Good,
Yeah.
good. I think that works. Krishna, you can get ready. You can unmute yourself and switch on your video.
Yeah, but once I introduce her, that's where she's going to come on board.
Yeah, no, it will take some time before you invite her, and then she takes it. So you might as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Herself. Yeah, that's good.
Okay. So it's 11 o'clock.
Rashmi, it is all with you now. Whenever you want to start.
Okay. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Rashmi Gupta. I'm the president of the Mahatma Gandhi Peace Council of Ottawa. I welcome you to this very special lecture by Jill Carr-Harris, Turning the Tide on Nonviolence in Education, Building Capacities for Nonviolent Leadership. A very, very warm welcome to our guest speaker, Jill Carr-Harris. Jill is an activist, educator, leader, and is currently finishing her thesis work in Toronto. I'm really astonished by Jill's enthusiasm and dedication. She's an ongoing inspiration for so many people around the globe, I would say. Thank you, Jill, for accepting this invitation. Mahatma Gandhi Peace Council was founded in the year 2006, and since then has been active in promoting Gandhian thoughts and principles through lectures, panel discussions, art and cultural events, and seva activities. The Peace Council is thankful to the Carleton University and the High Commission of India for their help and support in installing Gandhi's statue in the Carleton University campus. The Peace Council, in partnership with the Carleton University, has endowed the annual M.K. Gandhi Lecture in the College of the Humanities at Carleton University. The annual lecture event is once a year during the Peace Week and as a part of the celebration of Gandhi's birthday on October 2nd. The council has also organized other such events during the year. A record of MGPC's activities over the years exists on its website, gandhiji.ca. So now, just to, before we go to our program, I will first just go through the protocols of the Zoom meetings. Of course, thanks to Zoom that today we have guests from India, and all over Canada, which is just wonderful. The thing is that everybody will be muted during this event. And I request that if you have any question, kindly put your question, type your question on the chat to the host and not to the public. And Dr. Humar is our host. He's hosting the event, and he will be then later on at the end of the talk, he will forward all those questions to the speaker, Jill Carr-Harris. And so please just remember that. And I request that people who have to speak, they have to really unmute themselves. They are co-hosts and they can unmute themselves whenever they are, when their turn comes to speak. With that, now I will request Krishna Praharaj to recite Gandhi's favorite hymn, Vaishnav Janto Tene Hi Kahiye, in her beautiful voice. Krishna has been trained since very early age in Hindustani classical music by Dr. Vinay Bhide, who is also adjunct professor of musicology at the Carleton University in Ottawa. Krishna's mother, Bratiti Kaur, is a very good singer, I must mention here. This beautiful poem, Vaishnav Janto, was written in the 15th century by Narasimha Mehta, a great poet of Gujarat in India. The bhajan speaks about the life, ideals, and mentality of a person who is a true follower of God. The 7 key lessons that stand out in its simple lyrics are empathy, humility, to respect others, stability and purity of mind, truth and morality, detachment, to stay away from the evil. So with this, I would invite Krishna, please unmute yourself, Krishna, and go with that. Thank you.
Thank you. वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहीजे, पीड़ पराई जाने रे, पर दुखे उपकार करे तोए पर दुखे उपकार करे तोए मन अभिमान ना आने रे वैष्णव जन तो तेने कही सकल लोक मान सहुने वंदे निंदा ना करे के नीरे वाच काच मन निश्चल राखे धन धन जननी ते नीरे वैष्णव जन तो तेने कही समदृष्टि ने तृष्णा त्यागी पर श्री जी ने मात रे समदृष्टि ने तृष्णा त्यागी पर श्री जी ने मात रे समदृष्टि ने तृष्णा त्यागी पर श्री जी ने मात रे जे भात की असत्य न बोले पर धन नव झाली हाथ रे वैष्णव जन तो तेने कही जे पीड़ पराई जाने रे वैष्णव जन तो तेने कही मोह माया व्यापे नहीं जेने दृढ़ वैराग्य जिना मन मान रे राम नाम सुन ताली लागे सकल तीरथ तीना तन मन रे वैष्णव जन तो तेने कही वन लोभी ने कपट रहित छे काम क्रोध निवार्य रे भले नरसिंहो तेनु दर्शन करता कुल एको तिर तार्य रे वैष्णव जन तो तेने कही जे पीर पराई जाने रे पर दुखे उपकार करे तोए पर दुखे उपकार करे तोए मन अभिमान ना आने रे वैष्णव जन तो तेने कही
Thank you. Very good. Yeah. Thank you, Krishna. Thank you very much. I'll now request Heather Eaton to introduce our guest speaker, and I'll give this thing the stage to Heather. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rashmi and Trishna. That was lovely. And it is my great, great pleasure to introduce Jill Carr-Harris. Jill, I've known Jill a very long time, 25 years approximately. And we had children of a similar age. So we spent a lot of time together talking about children and spirituality and nonviolence and education. And so I consider Jill an enormously inspiring friend. But a few things about Jill professionally. So Jill is from Toronto, but has lived much of her life in India, although coming back here occasionally for various periods of time with different projects. Jill has been involved with Ekta Parishad with her partner Raja Kapol for many, many years, has been an active member of Ekta Parishad, which it's very difficult to summarize the work of Ekta Parishad because Ekta Parishad is a grassroots people's movement, but as one of the very few movements that has really embodied Gandhian principles of nonviolence, nonviolent social change. Jill has personally founded many different kinds of women's groups to help Dalit women, landless women, women needing housing and help. And just a couple of other little stories about Jill. So Jill has worked with the UN in India, and she's also someone who, when there was the tsunami in Sri Lanka, dropped everything and went to Sri Lanka to help people with housing. Jill has, I went to India with Jill, tried for 10 years to get me to come to India so I would participate in one of the yatras of Ekta Parishad, and I finally did it. And, you know, Jill was quite comfortable sleeping on the road with other people. Jill is phenomenally humble, but with enormous leadership capacity. Jill she is the co-founder of the Women's Grassroots organization in India. She is the director of the International Gandhian Institute for Peace and Nonviolence in India. She is the lead coordinator for the current Jai Jagat campaign, which she will talk about, which is the current yatra happening with Ekta Parishad and has an enormous international scope. And she is taking a pause periodically to finish her doctorate. So she's been thinking about all of this and writing about it and coalescing her ideas. And we very much look forward to reading those. So we are very lucky and privileged to have Jill Carr-Harris with us today. She's a friend, she's a scholar, she publishes, she's an activist, she lives very close to the grassroots. So with that, Jill, my friend, I'm delighted to introduce you and look forward to hearing your insights.
Thank you. Well, after that, it's so warm and wonderful to be with you all. I want to begin by thanking the Mahatma Gandhi Peace Council of Ottawa for this opportunity, in particular to Rashmi Gupta, Jag Hummer, of course, my good friend Heather Eaton and others, Anil Agarwal Bridge. I believe that we had the opportunity to meet in 2019 before the Jai Jagat, and you gave us all your best wishes, which we took on our march, our most recent march. I believe we had come in 2017, a few years earlier, after the unveiling of the Gandhi statue at Carleton University. We came with a group of many Indian friends to share with you in looking at Gandhian education and nonviolent action. So we've had some sort of relationship, and it's very dear to us that you are here and you have brought so many people together around the values and ideas of Mahatma Gandhi. I also, before I begin, want to thank Trisha for her beautiful voice, her inspiration, because song speaks louder than words, and she sets the tone for this discussion, which I hope we will have today. Now, today, turning the tide on nonviolence education is really about speaking about nonviolence education and the importance of the next generation to gain the knowledge, skills, capacities in nonviolence in dealing with huge issues of climate change, poverty reduction, and most importantly, peaceful coexistence, something that Gandhi reminded us of so often in his lifetime. That is, and as we come into an increasingly interdependent world, the clashes of civilizations, of nations, of religions need to be met with nonviolence and with peace. Now, in coming to this discussion, as Heather mentioned, I've come with more than a couple of decades of carrying out nonviolent action, mainly in India, also internationally. But in India, it has been primarily with marginalized communities and fighting on land rights, which you can appreciate is a tough issue, in which it's a very violent issue in which to bring nonviolent action. And in particular, I was always interested in the women, in their rights, so that they would gain dignity, assets, and a status which is often lost on them in their lives, and particularly rural and poorer women. So because of this history, I have been shaped and reshaped by nonviolence, and for more than 25 years. And having grown up and done my schooling and education in Toronto, I was so grateful as a young adult to be accepted into Indian society and to be able to live with Gandhian values in association with so many other Gandhian practitioners, a kind of fraternity, and to be loved and accepted in India. It has been, I'm very happy to say we have a few people in the participants from India, and that is of great compliment to me. I'm so thankful. It's been a long time interest to bring these ideas of Gandhi back to Canada. And as Heather said, informally, we had many discussions, we've had small meetings, but I was trying to figure out what would it be like, what is necessary to bring the importance of what's going on in terms of Gandhian action in India to Canada, to people who have interest. And I thought by doing a doctoral program that I could not only bring to activists, but also to academics and students some of these ideas. And so it is with that in mind, I wanted to bring some of these thoughts before you today. Nonviolent education may not be as familiar to you as, say, peace education or education for peace. Those of you who are not from India, you wonder, what is all this discussion about nonviolence? Why nonviolence? And why now? And I think I would like to reflect with all of you about different waves of India and nonviolence that has come to the West since Gandhi's death in 1948 rather. That initial wave, the first wave, was really the wave that came by way of the Sarvodaya movement, by under the leadership of Vinoba Bhave. Vinoba Bhave was a colleague, associate of Mahatma Gandhi, and his follower, one of the great leaders of the Sarvodaya movement. And he brought and began to bring, not only through his Bhudan movement, or his Gramdan movement, Gram Swaraj movement, his various activities of getting land for the poor, but he brought something which I hope all of you will take note of. He wrote a book called Thoughts on Education in 1959. And this was really trying to translate what it was that Gandhi communicated, not only through his Naitalam education, his basic education, but also through his life. How do these values get transmitted through education? And what became clear in Vinoba Bhave's book was that these values are embedded in action, that it's not that we don't see necessarily an education program separately, that they are within the life of someone, that their actions are educating people all the time. And this was quite an interesting departure from what we think of as conventional education. So Vinoba Bhave started this first wave, and it was culminated really by Jayaprakash Narayan in the 1970s, who led students to understand that they needed a whole different kind of politics, one that was value-based and not just based on political power. And he called for a total revolution. So here was Vinoba in the 30s and 40s talking about revaluing values, having a revolution of values, and ending with Jayaprakash Narayan talking about total revolution. But what is interesting about these expressions of revolution is that they were nonviolent. And they were, you can appreciate that when Vinoba Bhave was speaking and acting, it was at the same time that the Soviet Union was going through a Bolshevik revolution and the setting up of the Soviet Union, and seeing revolution as very, very important. And of course, also later Mao and the Chinese Revolution. This also influenced India in developing a communist party and speaking about revolution in India. But there was a unique counterpoint to this discussion, which was called, a revolution that was nonviolent, and it was led as a sarvodie, which means well-being of all, not a class struggle, but a struggle of all people. So this was the first wave, and it influenced many, many people. You can see it in the literature. I'm going to be happily sharing some of this with you once my dissertation is completed. But it was a really strong wave of influence. And then a second wave occurred in the 1990s. Now, after the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the rise of what appeared to be a unipolar world, again, the influence of nonviolence came because Marxism was waning, and people needed to continue to look for nonviolent social movements. And there were people like Gene Sharp in the United States who had been trained actually by Mahatma Gandhi in his youth. And he was deeply initially embedded, and he in the 90s was trying to find expression of how to bring this nonviolence forward as a theoretician. He actually brought a whole generation of scholars to talk about nonviolence and nonviolent movement building. And he was very, very significant in affecting many of the nonviolent movements that we saw thereafter. There was also in the 90s a deep green ecology movement that was shaped primarily by Arne Næss. He was a Norwegian philosopher. He was deeply steeped in Gandhian ideas, and he brought forward this idea of ecosophy, which was how to bring, our understanding of nature closer to Gandhian ideas of nonviolence. And this was extremely important, as you will see later, the kind of effect that it had on what I'm going to call the third wave. Now, I believe that this third wave is here today. And, sometimes we don't see it, but what I've seen in terms of the Jai Jagat campaign and my own international exposure to different activities, activists, academics, is that this is slowly emerging as a very important influence. It's primarily because of the climate crisis, the acute climate crisis that we face today, that people are seeing that different kinds of activism is needed that is bringing forward nonviolence. And it is also because of a global economy which has reached such a degree of inequity today that there is heightened violence, whether it's in terms of political polarization, as we have so clearly witnessed in the last 1 month in the United States, violence in terms of hate speech, which is gripping our media, being amplified by social media. And we see it in terms of violence, of growing authoritarianism, threatening our democratic institutions. We see it in terms of expansionism and certain wars that are going on. So violence has become part not only of our daily life in ways that was not there 25 years ago, but it has been manifested now in this devastating global pandemic, which we try to see health and economic challenges, how we can get out of this pandemic and this virus. But it is also because of our violent relationship to nature. So this third wave brings us back to a Gandhian-based nonviolence and some of its new narratives which need to counter this violence. Already we see in umpteen civil society organizations and their activities across the world expressions of nonviolence. But what is an interesting aspect of this third wave is those ideas that and actions that are coming from India and India's civil society that is really contesting singular leadership, uniform ideas, which have come as a product of Western individualism and as part of our contemporary economic system. Now, there is a toxic mix of strongman politics, along with the dominance of corporate power that have lionized what was once viewed as our liberal democracies, and it continues to pound large populations into submission in spite of growing hunger, a serious planetary crisis, and now a pandemic which is affecting everyone. Now, these violent forces have maintained their strategic advantage of dominating through technology, capital, information exchange. And in many cases, these players are backed by states with huge military arsenals and leaders that no longer seem deterred by human security and public safety. And so we have a leadership crisis. Now, as is the case, whenever there's a crisis of such proportion, there are waves of resistance, and in the interests of global peace and planetary survival. And the reason that some of these Gandhian nonviolent activists and as part of this third wave that I want to mention to you today is because they bring something very, very unique. I think what Gandhian activists and workers still bring is a vision of leadership that is based on interrelationship, interdependence. Because India, for thousands of years, in its unbroken history, in contrast to Europe, in spite of the invasions and restitutions, there was always a collective society that was based on some form of clan-based relationships. And these collectivities is what Gandhi used in the freedom struggle against the British to rally people to liberate themselves. Now, as they succeeded, these groups to compel Britain's withdrawal in 1947-48. And it was one of the strongest empires of the world at that time. There is something to be learned for how Gandhi used these groups and made them work in such a way to liberate such a huge monolith as we saw the British Empire of that time. Now, I want to tell you a short story of how Gandhi reworked these traditional clans, which were highly caste-based, and how he realized that the traditional ones were based on vertical hierarchies. And he needed to introduce cooperation into them. He needed to make a change in terms of groups in order for them to come together and be not just passing down and replicating traditions, but to do something that was very new. And what he did is he basically built on the aspirations of people for social justice. He went in the 1920s. I don't know if you're aware of this, but the non-cooperation movement was basically made up of 3 C's. The first C's was charkha, spinning wheel. And what Gandhi did is he got everybody to see that the spinning wheel was a symbol of Indians living without depending on the British and without depending on their trade in textiles, being able to produce their own cloth and living independently, practicing what he called Swaraj. And this was extremely important in order to begin to build different groups' consciousness for a new India. The second C, which he developed at that time, was colleges. What Gandhi did was he encouraged young people to leave British universities and to boycott them and to set up rural institutions that were more in line with constructing a new India based on its rural and population, less on industrialization, more on agriculture, more for the rural, less for the urban elites. And some of these young people not only boycotted the colleges, some of them moved into the freedom movement itself. The third C, which he, and by the way, that second C on education, he also introduced a form of nonviolent education called Naitalum, which was meant to get people to see that work-based education, working together, not following literacy, not doing book learning, but work, spinning and weaving would not only help the student to become more aware of their own self, but would help them to participate in a culture in which they could struggle together against the British Empire. So he introduced this form of education. The third and final C was councils. He asked people to boycott councils and British councils, which meant that they were supposed to set up their own councils for a self-responsible government. And this was extremely important. So in terms of the students, Gandhi had about, he basically spoke to millions of students in the period of 1920 to 1930 before the Salt Satyagraha. And what he had to do was to convince them to engage in a whole different perspective, and that perspective was to see themselves not only as needing personal autonomy, individual autonomy, but also had a duty and responsibility to society. And so he created something which is what I'm going to term, for the sake of this audience, individuals embedded in community. In other words, he didn't emphasize too heavily individual or personal autonomy. He didn't emphasize too much on the community. He was trying to put them together into a relationship. And this was extremely important for students to understand that their actions were good for themselves in terms of their own self-realization, but it was good for the construction of a new India and a independence from the colonial power. So this was what I'm going to argue today was the key precept of the nonviolent education, which actually got carried not only into the freedom struggle by those young people who became the freedom struggle leaders that led India to liberation, but he created it in the next generation, which then we saw in Sarvodaya movement after his own passing. It got re-established, and we saw it again in the second wave and again in the third wave. So what he's established has had a continuity through a century. And yet people don't really know or link this important education, which he did with those students in 1920, of having such a revolutionary impact on the next century. And so this is what we saw was how he created this impact for India's liberation. Now, returning to, returning to, just going to find my place again, returning to this issue of not the nonviolent leaders who were part of the third wave. What I want to do in the next part of my discussion is I want to talk to you about some of these leaders and what they've done. These are people that I've had the privilege to work with and learn from firsthand, and they all are internationally known personalities. but I want you to understand them not as individuals, which is what we tend to do in our understanding of leadership, is always to see these singular individuals, but to see them as part of this tradition, which I have tried to outline for you, and to see them as carrying forward this basic idea of individual embedded in community, or what I call as co-relation. So the first person I want to draw your attention to is Ilabat. And I'm sure many of you know or have heard. If not, let me just briefly introduce Ilabat. She is the founder of the Self-Employed Women's Association, SEWA, which is world known for its work. And Ilabat sits on the committee, it's called the Elders Committee, that was set up many years ago by Mandela to be a kind of an elder voice in giving us direction. So she has that kind of status. Ilabat created this women's organization in 1972. Basically, she was able to ground nonviolence. The important point that I want to make is I don't want to highlight Ilabat as much as to make the point that it wasn't about her. It was about the fact that she was able to ground nonviolence, make it living, make it something that people could see, feel, and understand. The way she brought nonviolence to life was within an organization of very poor women, mainly urban-based women, many from Ahmedabad in Gujarat, but also in other cities of India, and rural women. She brought this notion of organization, nonviolent organization. She grounded the principles and values of nonviolence in that organization. Therefore, the women who were struggling for labor, for their labor rights, for being recognized and getting dignified, she was able to do it within an organization and helping them to see themselves as a part of this nonviolent organization. And why this is so important is that many young people across the world who are fighting nonviolent and striking, Fridays for Futures comes to mind. So many are going on right now as we speak, but yet they tend to see nonviolence as a manifesto, as rules for, the rules for activists to be nonviolent, as a strategy of protest, of being part of their campaign methods. But they don't see it as a way of life. And it's no wonder they don't, because they haven't been part of organizations like the Mahatma Gandhi Peace Council of Ottawa. They've not been part of organizations where they can see people who are acting nonviolently, who practice nonviolence, who see nonviolence as an entity. And so consequently, what generally happens with young people is they see nonviolence, if they don't have that experience, they see nonviolence as an opposite to violence. They see nonviolence as not violence, and they stay within a violent world as opposed to recreating a world of nonviolence, because they think the world of nonviolence is still something to be attained after their campaign reaches its successful conclusion. And I think what we learn from Ilabat, that not only it exists for middle-class women, but it exists for poor women who have never had their labor valued. You can imagine that what is nonviolence for those women in Sewa? It is that people recognize them, that as home-based workers in sewing their garments, in recycling pots, in head loading wood from forests, that they are also being valued through their labor. And it's not, India doesn't have a history of individualism as we have in the West. So they see themselves in terms of what they contribute to their families. And so they see it as their labor, and they value themselves as a result of this organization of Sewa. And we, as people looking on, as bystanders looking on at this wonderful work of Seva, we say, oh my goodness, we have to value labor also. If we value labor, then these people get more recognized, and then they are part of a universal family. Otherwise, they remain excluded and always the other, the poor and marginalized other. And so it is with that in mind that Ilabat has been so powerful at bringing forward these for their dignified labor and their contribution to the economy, and how to build sustainability, because they are living in a most sustainable way. Like she talks in her book, which I recommend all of you read, Anuband, which she produced in 2011, talking about how these women, through acquiring food and clothing and shelter and health and income and getting money, all of these activities have been done by these women in tune with nature, in building a sustainable environment. And she's wanted to show them as being on the forefront of our need to change our civilization to be more in tune with nature. So this is an incredible contribution, again, building on correlation. Anuband is actually translated as correlation. So she built on this concept that was started by Gandhi, that was picked up by Vinoba Bhave, and that was really carried forward by her. And so it's not the individual we want to glorify here. It is the community, the individual embedded in a collective, in a tradition, and how she used this social unit that Gandhi talked about with his youth, a social unit to make change, and not to see change as being the efforts of a heroic individual, but to see it as a collective process. Now, I'd like to go to a second example, because India has millions of examples, but I will not tax you too long. A second example of nonviolence is the work of Vandana Shiva, a person who is well known in Canada. So I felt it was important to raise the fact that Vandana, again, is often seen as an individual because she's a brilliant and strong woman, great character, but to see her, in fact, as carrying a long Gandhian tradition in the way she sees the world, in the way she projects nonviolence in relation to nature. Now, at the same time, Vandana is no doubt on the forefront of this third wave that I was talking about from the Indian side, and we honor that. She is a woman in community. And if you notice in Vandana's 17 major works and her 24 co-edited works and hundreds of lectures and articles where she has made her views known, to so many of us, she always speaks of women. She speaks of women in groups, in changing the world, because she sees them as the self-organized units that need to make the change. But as did Ilabat, and what is so interesting in terms of how Vandana is extending this notion of trusteeship. Trusteeship was brought as a concept by J.C. Kumarappa, one of the Gandhian economists. I encourage all of you to read The Permanence of Economy. It's a great little read that was done in 1945 at the end of the war by Gandhi's colleague, Kumarappa. And he wrote about trusteeship. He wrote about how we need to see a whole different economy that is around self-organization. And he also raised environment. But Vandana has been able to take that line, that thread of the tradition, and speak not only about trusteeship, but earth trusteeship. And this is something that is the base of many of the environmentalists today. Their discussions around eco-democracy and earth trusteeship, and basically seeing nature and its living beings as an entity in and of itself, a web of nature, separate from the self-organizing of human beings and how they need to interact so that both continue to see the continuation of each other. The fact that we have hundreds of species going extinct every day on our planet is indicative that we do not see nature as separate entities that needs its own self-organizing principles to exist. And it was this line from Gandhi, again, from Kumarappa, over this past 60, 70 years that has been very important in laying the grounds for ecological thought and for ecological and peace to come together. So that is Vandana Shiva. But let me just give you a couple of others before we take a small break. And then we'll come back for our conclusion. The third and fourth examples, and these are less well known, but equally important, is the first is Loganathan from ASEFA. I encourage all of you to check out ASEFA, A-S-S-E-F-A. This has been an organization, again, built on women's groups. And Loganathan was a brilliant, innovative thinker who was able to think in economic terms. So very practical, not, very different from the Vandana Shiva, very practical, nuts and bolts, economic business thinker, who basically said that if we can get enough investment to small women's group and they can handle investment, they can build productive economic enterprises as they have in the dairy sector and other sectors in Tamil Nadu, we can actually change and make a complete sea change of our economy and make it nonviolent, make it work towards inclusion, make it so that the most marginalized communities are participating, but also have it as peaceful. Now, the mother of ASEFA was a woman called Krishnamal Jagannathan, and she, in her own right, was a Dalit woman from the village who grew up to fight with Vinoba Bhave. And she brought women together in those small groups, those Dalits together. So these groups are not just people in the village who can afford to come together, but she showed it was possible to bring the most downtrodden, the most marginalized of society into a group formation in order to fight for their land and homestead rights. And finally, I just want to introduce Gopal, you know, from Parishad. Raj Gopal, and so, but this is not, you know, to highlight my own initiatives by any means. This is really about the work and the organization and how Raj Gopal was able to organize in small groups in villages, mostly indigenous, but other very remote living landless or populations who were forced off their land because of a certain kind of development, and to organize these people to stand up with their own leadership, to fight for land rights, to become visible to the state and to the general public as part of the society, as important players, as leading the societies as nature-based dependent communities, to show how we have to live more in harmony in nature, and for them to come to the forefront and really help the government of in this case, India, but it could be in other countries as well, to help governments to understand that their policies should not be policies for urban-based elites, for only urban-based merchants, but it needs to include the millions of people, and like Ilabat we said earlier, to value the labor of people who work with their hands, who live physically, who are outside our nets of technology and capital and information exchange, who still have some very interesting things to offer in terms of knowledge and in terms of their practice. I need not say that we have in Canada been able to honor our Indigenous people to a much greater extent in these last 10 to 15 years, because we've realized that they too bring in Indigenous knowledge systems, ways of living with nature, ways of being in the world that can help us in dealing with the ecological and the kind of crises that we have in front of them. Hence, they are leaders. They are our leaders, but we don't necessarily see them as such. So these are all examples that got brought together by our Jai Jagat campaign, and it's a global peace and justice initiative. And the whole idea of the Jai Jagat means victory to the world. It means all for, you know, all of us together. Nobody left out, no one left behind. This initiative was meant to bring these important stories forward, these human stories, so that people have a basis for seeing that nonviolence exists, that it's real, that we can actually not see it only as an ideal, but that we can be individuals embedded in community. Before we turn, Jay, to the video, which I hope you'll play the Armenian video, since it seems to make more sense at this point in the discussion. But before we just conclude, to say that I encourage all of you to go to the Jai Jagat International website and read the green and white booklet, which is the Jai Jagat Manifesto, which is an effort to bring into a political discussion, bring into a broader global discussion what all of this means. This third wave of nonviolence. Now, Have you spoken some of the recent Jai Jagat March, which tried to bring some of this nonviolent way of being forward in its efforts in the past year? Jay, over to you.
Sure, Chilpan. So, Namaskar, Sathiyo. Good morning, good evening, good night to everyone. This is a song which was sung by our friends in Armenia. And it is a montage of the journey that we did during our time in India and in Armenia, but focusing on Armenia. So we call it the Armenia Experience music video because this is just a reflection of the experience that I had as a foot marcher during the Jai Jagat Global Peace Walk. So I'd like to share it with you. Jai Jagat.
ये फाइव जय जगत बोली
सबके हित के वास्ते अपना सुख विसारे जा सबके हित के वास्ते अपना सुख विसारे जा जय जगत जय जगत जय जगत पुकारे जा जय जगत जय जगत जय जगत पुकारे जा विसारे जा सबके हित के वास्ते अपना सुख विसारे जा. But in Armenian way, we should say Hachtanak, 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 Ashkari. Hachtanak, 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 Ashkari. Hachtanak, 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 Ashkari. Hachtanak, Hachtanak, Ashkari.
state of emergency will be called in Armenia tonight. We will reconvene it when it's possible.
Thank you, Jillian. Back to you.
Thank you, Jemaji. So, friends, bringing this back to the issue of facing. Sorry. My screen has just, can you see me? Hello?
Yeah, we can see you.
Sorry, my screen has just, yeah, great. So bringing this back to the issue of facing the toxic mix of strongman and strongman politics, along with the dominance of corporate power that has lionized what we once viewed as our liberal democracies, have lionized and made us very unsure of our liberal democracies. And, you know, we see that the way to counteract this is to create these associative groups that blends the individual autonomy and the duty and responsibility to groups in a way that does not, in a way where group unity cannot be broken. So you may remember that Gandhi spoke a lot about satyagraha, and satyagraha is in translation nonviolent action, but it's a certain kind of nonviolent action where you are so committed to overcome the obstacles and challenges facing you in reaching your goal that you hold on to that as a truth, and you hold on to it, and you do not allow the forces of violence to overwhelm you. And I think that is best done, as Gandhi showed, in groups. And that's why it's so important to have built this individual embedded in a group, which means that I can completely trust the people that I'm working with to back me up. And if anything happens to me, the work continues. And it will continue as it did, hopefully, over generations, as we saw with Gandhi. So nonviolence, as we've seen with Ilabat and Vandana Shiva and others, was grounded in real human relations and not simply as an ideal. Nonviolence in that way is an integral term in education. It's not a term representing an opposite. And if nonviolence is integral, then violence means that, nonviolence means that one can preempt violence, that one can deal with conflict and mediate and reconcile conflict. If violence is not preempted and it erupts, as we see and have seen on many recent events, then the genie comes out of the bottle. So a lot of nonviolence, which needs to be learned in education, is how to preempt violence from erupting and creating a situation where conflict can be resolved and mediated. So if we consider, in conclusion, this individual embedded in community as a way of building forward in our way of teaching, in our way of acting, then the weight of responsibility is not on one individual. We do not singularly see leadership as individualism and as one individual. And this enables us to actually gain some detachment and avoid burnout. I think we have a lot of examples where people find nonviolent action as very stressful. And it's not, as Rajgopal often says, it should be a happy experience. It's supposed to generate happiness, not generate a system where you always feel so overwhelmed and so negative about your adversary that you begin to demonize your adversary as the other. And so this is where, having this a measure of detachment is so helpful, and it helps a group to stay together, because if it's a happy experience, then groups want to be together. I think that as much as we tend to see activism as fighting for just cause, no matter how much unhappiness it creates, we don't realize that in the process, we lose people. We lose those huge possibilities of moving forward as groups to liberate ourselves from the domination that we have in our midst. Because violence is domination, it is exploitation. Nonviolence is about gaining freedom. It is very interesting. We tend to think of freedom as unhindered movement, unhindered non-intervention. But really, Gandhi gave us the understanding that freedom is freedom from exploitation, freedom from domination. And what we're feeling today for the first time, I think, in this pandemic and leading up to this pandemic, is that we, the majority of the people, are being exploited by our own economic systems, which we in fact have built and have nurtured and have believed in. And we now have to slowly peel ourselves away and, create our group in order to be able to bring nonviolence into existence through organization, through practice, and live differently according to beliefs where all people can benefit. So this is really the message that nonviolence education brings and helps us to see in the creation of leadership. So with that, I would like to draw my own remarks to a close. I think I've talked a long time and brought in many different points for your consideration. I would be extremely interested to see people's questions and see how we can take this group, the Mahatma Gandhi Peace Council of Ottawa, forward in playing a bigger role as an organization and making people understand that this third wave and nonviolence training and education is going to help us deal with some of the large global issues facing us today, and that we should not feel overwhelmed. We should not feel hopeless. As Greta Thunberg herself said in 2018, we need hope, but we need action first, because from action comes hope. Thank you very much.
I guess, yeah, Dr. Homer. Always stuck. That was absolutely, I mean, Jill, that was a really wonderful talk. There's so many things which you brought forward, and I think I will, I'm waiting for Dr. Homer to come and see if there are any questions.
Yeah, there are no questions on the chat room. There are a couple of comments, but if anyone wants to pose a question, I'll ask Chandra Madhyanathan to unmute himself or herself, sorry, and see if there is any question that she would like to pose now. You can speak up because I don't have it.
My question is, I find that caste system is so deeply embedded in India. And did it pose any hindrance in your advancement and teaching and getting people together? And my second part of the question is related to that, the political bribery, because any advancement we do, these politicians would like to impose restrictions so that they can benefit from any advancement that you intend there. Thank you.
Jug, I would just suggest we have a series of questions, and then I can.
Yeah, there are no questions really. Not in my chat room. That's why otherwise I would have read those questions. So I only saw a comment from Chandra, and so I invited her to.
Yeah. Yeah. Could Jagbai, could I suggest that we just let people have a couple of minutes to write their questions if they have, because there seems to be.
I did send a comment to everybody.
Should we just have a small video of, few minutes? Maybe we could show the Gandhi film, Jay.
Yeah.
And then while we're watching that, if people could formulate their questions, if there's no questions, then we'll just tie it up at the end.
Okay, yes.
Yeah. Janma Jay, can you just do that while people are formulating their questions?
Sure, Ben. The Ricky Kid song?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Jay. I have a few questions on the screen now, a couple of them, and I'll read them out one at a time. The first question is in two parts, so I'll read the first part first. This is from Manju Loda. In the West, the nonviolence is more of an elite dialogue and has been limited to academic research. It has not become a part of community living. It has to get into elementary education. It needs to be grassroots movement. Those who try have to snuggle with the competitive ideas of our society, where money is everything, rather than collaborative movement of the society at large. This is a sort of comment. We might want to comment on this.
Jug, do you want to read them all and then I'll just do a final concluding statement, or do you want me to respond to each one?
You want me to read all of them? You remember every one of those?
I'm taking notes, no problem.
Okay, you are, okay. Now the comment goes on to say, I would like to hear Dr. Carr-Harris speak a bit more about this idea that the language of nonviolence may be problematic in the sense that it might be too tightly tied to violence. Is its oppositional and dependent nature on the idea of violence a limitation? The third part is, how might teachers' colleges, which are focused on teacher education, make the changes you are insisting upon today? How might they implement nonviolent value-based education? Might it be a question of including courses on peace and nonviolence? Then there is a next one more person who has commented or has a question, and I'll read that. This is from Mr. Rahil Khan. what is Jay Jagat's perspective on contemporary non-violent movements like the Black Lives Matter movement here in North America and the farmers' protest in India? Do these capture Jay Jagat's broad perspective on how to create non-violent spaces to improve human rights and land rights, or are they only partial attempts to do so? That is, okay, one more, again from Manju Loda. In this competitive society, how can non-violence become a collaborative movement? How can it become a part of the elementary curriculum? And that's it.
Thank you. Thank you. So maybe we could just have a I'll just have a concluding statement and respond at the same time to these questions,
okay,
since it's been a long day, a long talk for everybody. In terms of Manju Lada's question, because the first was a comment about how nonviolent is still an elite dialogue and I think that's precisely, we're at a point where because of the global crises, it can no longer be an elite dialogue. It's something that matters to everybody in Canada, in North America. And so I think that we do need to bring it into our schools. We do need to talk about it. Organizations like the Mahatma Gandhi Peace Council of Ottawa have a role to play, obviously, in that. And so I 100% agree with you that we have our work cut out for us. In terms of Manju, your suggestion about having difficulty building collaborative movements in such a competitive society, I ask you to, look at some of the efforts that are being made with elementary school teaching. The slow peace is one that comes to mind. Speaking Our Piece comes to mind. These are all websites that will give you ideas of how teachers have been trying to move children away from competition and to collaborative projects, collaborative thinking, and basically working out conflicts. Learning the ABC of how to do conflict resolution in elementary school. So, Jug, if you could put that in the chat, that's the slow piece and the Speaking Our Piece as two websites that maybe the group will benefit from. In terms of the third question, the idea of language, that we're still too tightly coupling nonviolence with violence and seeing it as an opposite. That's, as I said, because we don't have, children are going to see nonviolence as not violence as long as they see violence all around them. If they see nonviolence, if there's a peace club, if there's a exposure camp which exposes children to different communities, a peace camp, if there is ways that children can identify, because more and more our churches, our temples are of less interest for some of the young people, but obviously the religious traditions help in building a sense of nonviolence. But we need our children to see it. And we as parents, as teachers, as civil actors need to find the ways to show children nonviolent education is our responsibility, not the Board of Education. And I think we need to take that very seriously. And if we do, there could be a sea change, especially in incorporating this idea of individual embedded in community. The fourth question about Teachers College, how do we get teachers, how do teacher educators help teachers being trained to understand nonviolence? Yes, there is a summer institute in Edmonton that does that work for teachers in their mid-teaching career. There are many examples in India where teachers are being trained in peace. There are examples in the United States of efforts. We have to pull it together. It might be useful if some of the teachers groups can pull some of their experiences together so that all of us can benefit in developing more coursework and helping teachers to bring it into the classroom. But also the importance of, in higher education, for professors of different subjects to have a place, a resource, a place to go to understand how to bring nonviolence into their discipline. There should be nonviolence in journalism, so we don't have the kind of journalism today which is based on sensational and violent events. We need nonviolence in politics, in political science, in international relations, so that we don't only see the political realism as the only form of politics, as even I believe in the conflict, the studies on conflict have to be much more emphasizing peace and nonviolence and what that looks like. And I'm very happy to hear that in the city of Ottawa, the universities of St. Paul's, Ottawa, and Carleton are thinking along those lines of developing a course. So it's really important that we take action. We have the examples, we have the models, we have experiences, we have traditions, and we have this new wave. So I believe that this is the moment. And finally, Rael Kanji's question, how does nonviolence fit with some of the contemporary movements? I think if Black Lives Matter is really building the belief of Black lives with white friends, with all segments of society, and not just creating a militant group of Black activists, then they are working closer to the nonviolence that we're talking about. The fear is that they begin to pull down statues of people who feel represent their tradition, and then there is polarized activism, and this does not help. So the Black Lives Matter leaders who are embracing, as many of them are, embracing a societal project to get people as they are to understand the roots of the US in terms of its slavery in order for everybody to live differently. This then would certainly be more in line with a Gandhian or nonviolent formulation. In terms of the farmers' protest, this is very much in the spirit of nonviolence. And I think slowly the farmers are realizing that if they line up with laborers, their labor, other poor communities, other segments of society, they too will become stronger. And having everybody see that agriculture in India is the mainstay of the economy. It may only be 14% of the GDP, but it feeds a population of 1.2 billion people. So this is the response, Kanji. I hope this meets your your question. So in conclusion, I would just like to thank all of the organizers of this meeting and to say that it has been a great pleasure after being 30 years in India to be able to come home and bring with me this experience and this research that I hope we can collectively share and make our young people see nonviolence as more salient, as more significant, and as a way of life as they move forward in facing the huge challenges ahead. Thank you very much.
Jill, thank you so very much. You know, believe me, the way you have presented this whole thing, I can just be there and we can talk for, hours to really learn from that itself, because yes, you are very right. Like we all, and I'm sure that everybody will agree that we all have this kind of mindset that, okay, we're talking about nonviolence, not as something which has to be a human, natural part of us, but rather there is something which we have to adapt, which we have to really tell, we have to teach, we have to do that way. And it has to become a natural process, and that is just like something which is like when somebody sings and then say that singing is so beautiful, but then some people get a headache because they are putting so much effort in that. It's just like that. It's just absolutely beautiful. I really would like to now invite Rahil Khan to say his thank you note actually for everybody, and of course for you. I think this was very inspiring, very thought-provoking, and something to really take back and think about, how to do things in the right way rather than, trying to put it like a force. So thanks again. Rahil.
Hi, Jill Carr-Harris. That was my question. You did answer it very nicely. So, bahut dhanyavad aapke liye. So just as closing remarks, because I know that the caffeine from this morning has probably worked its way in people's system. So there's a massive bathroom rush about to happen after this lecture. So I'll just have a few remarks. I kind of recall Jill Carr-Harris, I kind of recall that from another venue, there's an anniversary of the Selma March happening this month. And there was a webinar event called This Isn't Your Grandparents' Movement. And it was trying to make the crosswalks between the civil rights movement and I guess younger people, younger activists. And I kind of felt that your talk, it kind of evokes the same spirit of the freedom movement of which Gandhi led with other many people, men and women. It was a way of invoking the lessons from that movement across the generations to today. So I thought that was very helpful. And a number of the thoughts and currents that you articulate today are things that our board have been talking about and sometimes even clashing about the issue about creating nonviolent spaces versus the role of nonviolent protest. So I think it was a very kind of salient conversation piece that you raised. And the other point interesting that you mentioned about the role of happiness. Even if you are an activist or involved in protests, it's not necessarily a stressful and demoralizing endeavor. It should be something that actually brings more people in the tent over time and something that has joy associated with it, which is probably a perspective that I probably have not thought about. So I think there's a lot that you covered, a lot for us to think about. And there is a lot for us to maybe unpack to see how we can disseminate that to a broader audience. One of the challenges of our organization is to try and recreate Gandhi for our demographic groups for whom he is very far from their everyday consciousness. And I think you invoked the name of Greta Thunberg as maybe somebody who doesn't talk about Gandhi or even references Gandhi, but has a lot of a Gandhian ethos to her thoughts and her activities. So those are my thoughts to you. And I just want to thank you for the comprehensive and very profound lecture that you gave us. And there's much for us to reflect on and maybe come back to you as for further questioning and for further learning in the near future.
Could I also, if I may, ask us to end with a little short, very short video song to leave us enervated if Jay is still with us and hasn't fallen asleep. Would that be possible? So we can just conclude with that. Jay, are you there?
Yes, Shilpan, I'm here.
Jay is there. Yes, sure. Go ahead, Jay. And I just wanted to tell everyone that this recording of this talk will be on the website of Mahatma Gandhi Peace Council in a short while, and you can certainly go over it again. Thank you again, Jill. And Jay, you can go ahead and play the video.
Sure. This final song that I'm going to be playing is called Gandhi Baba Kanun Se Lade, which means Gandhiji went up against the system, essentially, and it's a tribal song. Yeah, actually, within the song, we have Rajaji explaining what the song is about, so I shall let him.
Gandhi was using law. He didn't use gun. While everybody was, rich people were trying to run factories, Gandhi was trying to run the handspin chuck. While rich people were traveling in big vehicles, Gandhi was using footpath.
Is the playback okay?
No. Oh, yeah, better now.
Carry on, Jay. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Traveling in big vehicles, Gandhi was using footpath. So this is it's a tribal scene. Even in deep tribal area of India, hundreds of tribal women and men are coming to
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jagmohanji.
Jai Jagat.
Jai Jagat.
Jai Jagat.
Jill, you have a wonderful day.
Are we finished, Rashmi?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. Yes,
Okay.
I guess
Then I'll